potent advice, and inspiration from real self-made millionaires. Welcome to The Eventual Millionaire with your host, Jaime Masters.
Welcome to Eventual Millionaire. I am Jaime Masters, and today on the show we have Peter Kozodoy. You should check out his brand new book called Honest to Greatness. He's also an Inc. 5000 serial entrepreneur and a business coach. It looks beautiful. Thanks so much for coming on the show today.
It's my pleasure, Jaime.
So honesty, blah, 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 is the best policy, right? That's what everybody says.
Yeah,
but
insert BS here.
Exactly. Yeah. Great. And I love the name of your title, though. Way better than honesty is the best policy. There's nuances to this, though. So tell me a little bit about the premise of the book.
Yeah, well, people got very excited when they figured out that I was, writing and speaking about honesty, because they're like, Peter, wow, I'm so honest, and I just tell it like it is all the time, and I don't care what people think and all that. And I'm like, well, that's cool, but that's not honest. You're probably just a jerk. Like, you're probably just like a bad person. That's not what honesty is. And that's where I think a lot of the confusion comes in. Is folks have come out and said, like, well, how do you say this person's honest or that person's not honest or this and that? And I think the term we need to start right out of the gate, Jaime, is strategic, brutal honesty. And all of those words are important. That it is strategic and brutal and also honest at the end of the day. One of the CEOs in my book makes a good point. He says, if you're flying in an airplane and the pilots come over the intercom and they say, well, folks, we've never seen storm clouds like that before up ahead, so please fasten your seatbelts. Not quite sure if we're going to be able to land this one, but we're going to do our best. And so listen, is that honest? Yes, but it's not helpful, right? So what we have to do is redefine what honesty even means. And I think it's easier, as you can see how I started, by defining what it doesn't mean. So, what I do in the book is I take it and I stratify it in three crucial layers. And by the way, they're the same layers that all of the organizations in the book, from an 11-year-old Girl Scout that sold 30,000 boxes of Girl Scout cookies up to Warren Buffett himself, use every day. And those layers are, and we'll get into it more, but basically getting honest about, the community at large, about the people around you, and then finally about yourself. And what I found is those who align all three of those levels, both at the personal leadership level and at the organization level, actually create industry dominating profitability and results. And that's the most important thing. Listen, I was very pleased that this premiered as, number one new release on Amazon for a couple categories. One of them was business ethics. And look, I think people should be ethical and nice and moral and all that happy horse crap, but that's not what this book is about. This book is about, in a brutally transparent society that we live in, what is the way to achieve results in your business and life? And I was more shocked than anyone, Jaime, I promise you, that honesty turned out to be the method to achieve it.
Everyone's like, wait, ROI and honesty? This sounds great, because what we've been told, especially by skeezy used car salesmen, that is not really the way you're supposed to do it. So
yeah, we call it ROH, return on honesty.
Ooh, I like that. And everybody listening's like, all right, now I'm going to pay attention, because if I can get a return, this makes me way more interested than just, being aligned and all that fun stuff.
No.
But what is the difference between brutal honesty and being a jerk, like you just said, though?
Yeah. So remember, it's strategic, brutal honesty. So there is a point. So I do a lot of business coaching, right? Helping entrepreneurs figure out what it even takes to build a 7-figure business. It took me a lot longer than it should, because I didn't know enough to ask for help, right? So now I've helped literally hundreds of entrepreneurs figure this out. And here's the deal. 99% of business problems are personal problems in disguise. That's brutal, right? So the question is, how does one get so brutally honest with themselves, mostly, that they can understand that their sales problem is really, say, a confidence problem, or their leadership problem is really a personal communication style problem? You trace all these things from one place to another. It's amazing what you can learn about yourself as a leader, and therefore how it directly impacts your organization. Now the self part's probably evident to people. They're like, yeah, no, I probably should be brutally honest with myself. Of course, easier said than done, and most people don't, right? Honesty is like self-awareness. It's that thing, like, everybody insists they have it. Everyone wants it. Very few actually possess it, right? But there is a place for being brutally honest, both with and about the others around you. And a lot of what I talk about in the book is understanding the distinction, because sometimes we do need to be brutally honest with the people around us. Hey, I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to offend you. However, we need to have an honest discussion about what's going on here, about your behavior, about whatever. Now, a lot of what I talk about in the book is we can't always control others. Sometimes we need to be honest about them, about their thoughts, their feelings, their hopes, dreams, desires, their limitations, their self-limiting beliefs, the size of their ego. That's a lot of being brutally honest too. And then what's interesting about that, Jaime, is it means we can only take one action, which is to reflect on what we're honestly seeing and make changes about and in ourselves, right? And all of that comes back to we can't see those opportunities. We can't change those opportunities. We can't even spot we can't do anything without honesty at the root. And that's why I was so excited to write this particular book, because it's such a, not everything builds on it. Nothing happens if you're just full of crap and lying to yourself and others.
I'm so grateful for the leading edge that you're bringing this out to, right? Because back in the day, even when 4 Agreements came out and it was like, be impeccable with your word, it's like, yes. And how do we actually do that? Because we don't even realize the dissonance that we have internally a lot of times. Right. So tell me a little bit more about, especially at the beginning stages, when everyone's raising their hand going, no, I'm pretty good, like self-aware. I totally get this. How do we even notice what we're not doing quote unquote, correctly?
Yeah. So, I'll give you a couple of frameworks, but one thing I will say is this is so hard to do alone. If this were possible to do within our own heads, A, the entire therapy business would not exist, right? B, you would magically become more self-aware as soon as you decided you were going to do it. We know those things aren't true. So y'all have to understand that you can't just in a vacuum decide I'm going to get honest about my own crap. It doesn't work that way. That's why I run forums for entrepreneurs, and we come together once a month, and literally with 100% confidentiality, the whole idea is let's get really honest about the things that are going on in our business life, personal life, family life, the stuff we can't say out loud to those who love us, the stuff we can't say to our parents, to our kids, to our spouses, to our whatever, because they're going to say, well, maybe it's time to get a real job, like not helpful, right? So, that's why I've created those safe spaces so entrepreneurs can get that out, because what happens after that's magical. You get 6, 7, 8, 9 other people saying, holy crap, I went through that too, and here's how I felt about it, and here's what I did, and here's what happened. Very, very powerful, because it's only through that sort of power of reflection, getting honest perspectives from other people, can we begin to change ourselves. At least that's the best method I've found. Now, that said, I will give you one trick to immediately put yourself on the path to this, which is 2 questions that they have the opportunity to change your life if you can adopt them. The first is that true? And the second is, how do I know? And you can imagine this applies whether you are watching a headline on the nightly news or reading your great Aunt Millie's obnoxious Facebook post, or even having a thought in your head. So often I work with entrepreneurs and I'm listening to them and they're saying like, yeah, no, I know I needed to go do this, but in order to do this, I have to do that thing and that thing and that thing. I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. Is that true? Who told you? How do you know? And they're like, well, I don't know. I mean, I was on a live stream the other day with a mentorship group, and someone was talking about like systems and processes. And they're like, how do I put systems and processes in my company? And I was like, well, what this sounds like is you read a book that says, oh, you need systems and processes. And now you're like, oh, I need systems and processes. And then they're looking at me like, so what do I system and process? And I'm like, yeah, good question. Like, how about let's back the truck up and ask like, what's the business foundation here? Are you clear on your customer and their pain point? Are you clear on the problem you're solving, on the solution, on the profit model you've designed, on your own ability to see this business, how it evolves over the next 3 to 5 years? Because, and this particular person was like a service provider, right? Think like a chiropractor. Mm-hmm. Well, to systemize being a chiropractor is very different than to systemize being an owner of a chiropractic HR software company. You know what I mean? Like, so, and so often I have entrepreneurs who are like, yeah, I'm going to build $100 million company doing X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, do you think it's a coincidence why there are like all the companies that look like the one you just told me about hit a ceiling at about 5 million? Do you think there's something there? Like there are certain companies from the get-go that entrepreneurs are just not honest with themselves about what it takes structurally in the beginning, from the get-go, to make these kinds of goals happen. And that's where I do most of my work, Jaime, is like in the foundation of the business.
Okay. We can go so deep on this because I'm a business coach. I've been for 12, 13 years. Exactly awesome. What you're saying is true. So true. And the fact that we use it as like a shield, right? So not only are we not being vulnerable with people, so we're like, no, we have everything. We're fine. Everything's great over here, right? Internally, more mental health issues than ever before, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yet we're going, and no offense to all those great internet marketers out there, but they're like, oh, you can have anything you want. All you need to do is buy this thing and go here and right? And like everything is incongruent. And yet we're like, wait, it must be us. And what you're telling us is that it is not. I mean, it is us, but in a way that we can take responsibility for instead of, abdicating and saying it's, outside of us, which is what a lot of entrepreneurs do, unfortunately.
Oh, gosh. It's so good. I had 2 entrepreneurs on my live stream show. One is an incredible woman from Ghana, grew up in Africa. And she came on the show, and it's, my show is called Let's Be Honest with Peter Cosdoy, right? So I get these and people love it. They react to it. They're like, oh, great. I get to spill out all my stuff, which is awesome. And by the way, I think that's a lesson for all of us to invite others to be honest, because sometimes just the invitation can allow someone to open up. And there's a lot of just power and human connection in that. But anyway, she's talking about, hey, everyone's talking about Africa and how much charity we need for Africa. And do you know what the problem is in Africa? And I was like, no, honestly, I have no idea, right? I'm not an expert in this. And she's like, corruption. She's like, none of you in the United States, in her beautiful accent that I will not try to copy, none of you in the United States can give us enough money to solve the corruption problem. We have to solve it for ourselves. This is we're in Africa, we need to solve this for ourselves problem. And everyone in Africa is thinking, oh, we're going to put it on the rest of the world. She's like, this is decimating. It's horrible. And I was fascinated because I'd never heard that perspective before in my life. And the fact that she was on, sharing that, I was really blown away. But what a macrocosm of what you just said, Jaime, which is there's so much it's almost like we've given ourselves too many opportunities now through social media and through people selling courses and that now it becomes the opportunities problem instead of our own inner growth, right? Personal development, actually going out and seeking the assistance we need and not being afraid that when someone tells us that our idea is shitty, that we take that and we actually do something about it, right? God forbid that happen. So, all these do to being honest, brutally honest with yourself.
What, we don't all get medals? That's not how this world works right now?
I grew up as a figure skater, a very serious figure skater.
Wow.
Yeah. So this everyone gets medal thing? No. In my world, everyone fell on their ass thing. I was the everyone half the time, right? And getting on the podium actually meant something. So for me, that whole idea. Gosh, I remember, I was because I had skated since I was 3. And when I got to middle school, I was wait, there are teams and you can go out on the field and you can pass a ball from one person to the other and make it their problem. This is fantastic. Where did I go wrong? Anyway.
Why did I pick a self-responsibility sport? What the hell?
What was wrong with me? But you know what? After you're out in front of 3,000 people in the middle of the ice, all alone, and you fall wearing tights, nothing is difficult after that. That is the pinnacle of hard. Right?
I will bow to you. Yes, you can do hard things. Yeah. I mean, I think that's what's so interesting too. Even our core family values that I have up is self-responsibility, which my children don't like. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that they do, but to be able to sort of look inward, because whenever I work with millionaire business owners and it's really interesting because they each have their own flavor of issues, right? And when you can start, especially as an outsider, I can look and be like, oh, you got this, right? But internally, and I've known this for myself, it feels like you're reinventing the wheel each time and you get sort of hooked in these patterns, right? Our programming that we've had for a long time, because that's sort of what we always do. We never ask for help. We never do this, right? So it feels super uncomfortable, even if it's super small. Yeah. So how do we get through that practice of having to do this often? So that way, hopefully it will be more automatic, specifically asking for help. If you sucked at it, so do I, or so did I, and I'm working on it, right? So does half the entrepreneurs that are listening right now. Tell me how we can start moving forward to make it easier. I
mean, I'll tell you how I solved it, right? Which is, who had known me, I had to, this was funny, right? I had to learn about honesty and vulnerability and transparency and all this crap. I was the guy who was most likely to continue being an a-hole in college. That would have been my superlative, right? And I had to learn the power of all this stuff. And in my young 20s, I started my company in 2008, right out of college. Great timing, Peter. Immediately went tens of thousands of dollars into debt because I didn't know what I was doing. Spent 4 years basically bouncing along the overdraft account, right? Until finally we figured out enough so that we could hook in and get to million and multi-millions and Inc. 5000 list. But it took so much pain, years and millions of dollars wasted, right? And I could have just gone and spent 10 grand or 20 grand, or quite frankly, Jamie, if I had spent 100 grand on a coach, it would have saved me more money and time, right? I mean, this is what's crazy about people. But we have this magical coach called the internet now. And we can just Google and see what, Forbes columnist so-and-so said. And, they said, systemize my business. So now I know the answer and I'm going to go do that. And here's what I decided that helped me. I asked myself, who am I? What kind of entrepreneur am I? Am I the story that I look back on and say, wow, I spent 10 years struggling? This is after I'd spent 5 years struggling. And I was like, no, that would be pretty embarrassing to have to tell people. Yeah, I'm the guy that was going to figure it out on my own. That's why I wasted 10 years of my life. Like, is that me? Is that who I want to be? The answer was no, definitely not. And that's when I started to make changes. And one of the changes I made was just agreeing to talk to anyone. I was like, I'll talk to anybody. You just don't know. I mean, conversations that I've had have led me to millions of dollars, had led me to speaking gigs, literary agents and publishers. Like, really, every great thing I have in my life has been a conversation that I had no idea where it was going to go. Oh, yeah, I know so-and-so VP of marketing at Fortune 500 company. Yeah, I'll just say, oh, that's your brother-in-law? Oh, okay, well, that's cool, right? Didn't know that ahead of time. And it cracks me up because I'm very, I share my calendar freely. Like, I'm not going to talk to like anyone, because I don't really like, if there's like I get contacted by like, hi, I'm a 16-year-old in India and I want, this is like not my target market, right? So, but if you're, a reasonable person with a reasonable LinkedIn profile, I will talk to you. And if you want to test that out, go to LinkedIn and ping me and tell me what you want to talk to me about. But my point is, some folks I'll make that offer to. Like, I was on John Lee Dumas's show, right? Entrepreneurs on Fire. And I gave them a page and I was like, hey, you can book a time with me. So a lot of people did, but I was fascinated with the people who booked and then backed out for some reason or another, right? Or the ones that I had a conversation with that told me every reason why they needed help. They needed the kind of help I provide. I'm going to follow up with you. And then they'd like email me a week later and be like, you know what? I thought I feel like I have everything under control, so I'm good. I'm just like,
oh, okay, have fun with that, right?
Unbelievable, right? Yeah. So that's showing you that there was something that came in: fear, uncertainty, pride, ego, whatever it was. And the point I want to make to everyone listening is, think deeply when you are making decisions to have a conversation with someone, to take advantage of a free offer, whatever. I even like being sold to. I even will go on sales webinars and stuff just to listen and be like, oh, that stuff's interesting. Oh, I'm learning from this. And people are so like, no, I don't do those, right? Or I don't do this kind of thing. It's like, when you close doors like that, you must also be honest with yourself that you are missing opportunities. Period. Stop. Like, that is the truth. So it's up to you to figure out, like, what kind of person do you want to be? Do you want to be an open person who is the one to have been lucky, right? This is how to create your own luck, to find an opportunity, an insight, a connection, a relationship, a referral, or not. Things are out there for you to take. I'll get off my soapbox.
I'm always on soapbox, so I appreciate you. I preach, please, because everybody actually needs to not only hear it but internalize it, because it's very different to be like, yeah, he's right. He's so smart, right? Versus, oh no, I have to actually turn the mirror on myself. That's great, right? Yeah. So where does that line, or if there is a line, where do you see it? Because newer entrepreneurs, especially, in my opinion, is try to protect themselves, right? Because they're like, they don't want to be looked bad upon because they might not be able to make the sale. Their company is trying to look bigger than it technically might need to be, right? Yeah, so there's these like, who do I say what to? Because I can only be vulnerable to maybe a close, intimate, personal friend or mentor, but everybody else I have to be like, I got my stuff together, so they don't think that I can't handle what they give me, right? Whether it be sales or relationships or whatever, we look vulnerable and crappy, typically. So when it comes to that, is that accurate? Should they be doing that? Who should they be opening up to versus not, so that they don't look bad?
Yeah. Wow. Such a great question, because every entrepreneur struggles with this, and I certainly did. And here's what I've learned that I wouldn't have believed if someone told me this when I was like 24, right? I wouldn't have believed it. But the premise is this: if you're a startup company and you have a solution that the market really actually cares about, it is enough that you're solving a customer's problem to the type of clients that you probably want to work with anyway. Just think about what I said for a moment, right? Because the clients that you have to pretend to be something else for, eventually either the truth will come out and they'll be pissed off, or it will grind you down so hard because there's some sort of values mismatch. You are the young upstart, you are the innovative one, you are the high touch customer service one. That's what we can do when we're small. And there are some clients that will love that if you're just willing to be honest about it. And I've played that both ways. Every time we start a new division, I actually use that as a selling tactic. I'm like, because this is 2020, right? So we had a couple of manufacturing clients, and they used to do millions of dollars at the trade shows. Trade shows died. So they were like, okay, what do we do? And we were like, well, trade show's going virtual. We just go virtual. We set up funnels. We have opt-ins. We do that. And they were like, don't know if any of that's English. You go do that for us. And we were like, okay, fine. So now we're building those. And we went to market to other manufacturing firms. Now, manufacturing was a small piece of business. Now it's getting to be a much bigger one. But when we went to market and said, hey, where's your virtual trade show booth? If you don't have it, let's talk. I'd get on conversations and people would say like, hey, what other, do you have a manufacturing firm that specializes in Swiss screw machines? And I'd be like, no, nobody has that. Like, first of all, stop. By the way, very dishonest practice. Wanting to copy your competitors or find the vendor that works with all your competitors. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. Please stop doing it. It's dishonest. And Warren Buffett agrees with me on that, by the way. But aside from that, I would literally say to them, no, I don't. And that's a really good thing. Because if you want that, I honestly don't know where you'd get it. But even if you did, think about this. We are specialists who've worked in 30 industries, even up to Fortune 500s and Warren Buffett himself. This is what our other manufacturing clients have asked us to do. What does that mean to you? By the way, you're on the phone with the owner. What that should signal to you is I am personally working on this new initiative, that I am going to be personally guiding your project, the owner of an Inc. 5000 company. If that doesn't have value, you probably won't love working with us because I'm going to be on your ass. I'm going to be calling you and emailing you and making sure we have all your assets and making sure this works so I can go sell everyone else. Does that resonate with you? And more often than not, they're like, actually, that's a great point. Let's get started. And sometimes not. They're like, no, I need to find the person who's worked with 20 other Swiss screw machines. Fine. But I don't want to work with them anyway.
Exactly.
I'll use.
Well, when you can actually have the open policy, whether it be with clients or your own employees, it just seems easier.
It's so much easier.
Right? Because then values are sort of automatic instead of you going, oh, wait, why is this resistance even here? I don't know. Oh, it's because I should have told them way beforehand where I was at. Because when we don't, even when we don't even realize that we're doing it, right? Sometimes we'll be like, oh, I did a sales call and I sold them, but I'm a little like, why? That's weird, right? And we can't even put words to it. So tell me a little bit more about how we can get a better skill set with even knowing where we're at with conversations like
One
this.
of the best exercises I talk about in part 3 of my book is we all know core values for companies, and that's all the rage. And it's like, wait a second, we missed a step here, which is, what are our core values as people? And I have to credit Columbia Business. I decided after 30 and after building $1 million company that I was stupid and I needed to go get an MBA. So I did. I went back to Columbia, got an MBA, and I was right. Wow, how much did I not know about business, finance in general that I should have? I mean, it was shocking. So that was wonderful. And one of the first things we did in the first semester was a core values exercise. Not only understanding what our individual core values are, but what the hierarchy of those values is, what the order is. For instance, in my core values hierarchy, and I talk about this in the book, I actually have service above honesty, surprisingly enough, which means that if I have the opportunity to serve someone else to help them, and I have to lie to do it, I will make that trade. Whereas someone else may have the exact same values, but flipped. And so even though they have the same values, I'm going to come into conflict with them because they would never make that trade. You see? So just going through the exercise and then being aware. And so funny, Jamie, after I did that, I walked around thinking like, I'm listening to Jamie talk. I'm like, what are her core values? Trying to pick out things she's saying, like, oh, I bet. Wow, it sounds like she's talking a lot about, doing what you say and saying what you do. I bet integrity is a big word for her. I bet, whatever. And what's great about values is there's no right or wrong. We were working with a Fortune 500 for the past year, energy sector. And one of their core values is speed. They are the slowest company I've ever worked with my entire life, right? Everything takes forever. And what's silly is if they just said like, lethargy is our core value, or taking your time, that's our core value. What would happen is they would repel the employees that want to move fast, that come into conflict with the core value, and they would attract all these people that are like, oh, thank goodness, I hate making decisions quickly. I love to read every single consumer report, and they'd literally build a culture of alignment, and it would be so much more effective. So it's not right or wrong, and what sucks is you have all these companies and also people, leaders, I use that term loosely, trying to pretend that their values are something that they're not. And values are not something you can just like manufacture. And Jaime, you put your finger on it where it's like, oh, I just sold that person. And it's like, ooh, why do I feel not excited about that or kind of icky about that? Or I literally just talked to someone the other day who was in the same situation. Like, it's a multi-million-dollar piece of business. And now I'm thinking about telling this person no. Why am I even having this crazy thought? And it is 99% of the time a core values issue.
See, because we run by I'm so appreciative of you saying this, because I preach again, because we're running our lives by them. And if we do not know them, just like with our strengths, we're like, why does this feel great when I do this and time goes by like nothing? Oh, why do I do this just automatically and I can't help myself?
Yep.
Right. And so putting names to things really important for yourself and for your family, but also, gosh darn it, your employees. I said, gosh darn it. I don't think I've ever said that on my show. Gosh darn it, your employees, because, right, when we put on our job description, or if you're doing any sort of posting, it's like, put your core values, because you will repel the people that suck, that don't have the same culture as you.
Totally.
And you want that so bad because, I mean, you're going to, no offense, have to fire them shortly after because of that. I actually added to my company values a while ago because I had hired somebody that I considered an Eeyore. And I am a very positive person. And I was like,
I love that.
How is positivity not even on my list? Like, that's sort of kind of a thing for me. And I didn't even realize until I had already hired someone and was like, oh, I don't even like getting on the phone with them. Right. And had to let them go. And so it's an evolutionary process. You don't necessarily have to have everything perfect as you go through.
Totally.
But how do you sort of unwind what that is and sort of evolve your values?
I mean, listen, I had to start somewhere, right? So, doing that MBA really forced me to even think for the first time about that. Ironically, here I was having helped multiple organizations through a core values exercise and never thought to do it to myself, right? So, it's one of those. I love
that your book's about honesty and you just admitted that. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, oh, no, trust me, I admit all kinds of things. It's actually kind of an interesting thing being an author about honesty, because I just get to be honest, right? So much of this is awareness. So much of it is just having a lens of honesty. And those two questions I gave you earlier, like, is that true? And how do I know? Pausing to think. And here's why, like the forum program I told you about is powerful. Just giving yourself time in the month to reflect and say, like, what things bothered me this month? And then asking, why did they bother you? And just having the awareness and the presence to have those kinds of thoughts. And then to look, I mean, I love that you're talking about core values. You literally look that way.
I have,
I
have it.
Right?
Yeah.
So like, I'm a big proponent of like sticky notes. Like, I tell my clients, like, that's a bathroom sticky note, put it on your back. Like, people need to have things in front of them. If it's not present, it's not going to be important to you. And I think that's the missed opportunity. That's why I think things like so powerful, right? Because if you don't get it out of your head and write it down, it just floats away, or it bubbles beneath the surface and it wreaks havoc.
Just like with like your goals or whatever, you'd have it on somewhere in a folder randomly. And I'm like, no. I would like to be called out. I've actually given my kids permission to call me out when I am not living by our family values, which is not fun, by the way, just so everybody's clear. It's like,
but it's a great leadership trait.
Right. And again, for any of your employees, I hope that they call me out, because I sometimes am not even self-aware, right? Yeah. To even be able to do it, just because of the patterns and the habits. How long, and I know you probably don't have an answer to this, but I want one, so make something up. No. How long does some of this stuff take, right? Because a lot of it's neuroprogramming, just because we are so patterned in the ways that we do things, or the hustle culture of entrepreneurs. It's like, it doesn't matter how you feel. Presence. Just keep doing what you got to do, right? Versus what you're saying, which is kind of totally the opposite.
Well, first, let's be honest. Nothing matters except how you feel. People we're at the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Self-actualization. Yeah. That's about feeling. You already have the food, the shelter. Then it's, how do I gain success and fulfillment? And by the way, those things, like success is just happiness, fulfillment, they're all, names the same thing, which is a feeling. So anyway, I think that's important. How long does it take? Well, I'll have two answers to that. The first is, ask me when I'm on my deathbed. I'll let you know. But the second is, I found with certain things, once I was able to identify it and then took action steps to do it, faster than I thought. For instance, I was convinced for most of my life that I had an abundance mindset. And it occurred to me through a thought that I was having, some habits that I have, like maybe I don't, right? Maybe I have a scarcity mindset. And if I did, how would that show up? And so I started watching for it. Now, it's the fact that I'm even talking about abundance and scarcity mindsets. Like I'm telling you right now, Jamie, if people who knew me in my like young 20s knew I was even talking about this, they'd be like, this guy's smoking the ganja. Like what happened to this person? And brutal honesty happened. But the point is, once I was asking myself, like, do I have a scarcity mindset? All right, what do people with scarcity mindsets do? Well, they watch things like The Secret that no one wants to admit that they watched on Netflix, even though it's one of the most watched things. They go to Spotify and they listen to abundance mindset things. And so I just did all of it. I was like, okay, well, if I have it, and I think I have some evidence that I do, I'm just going to attack it as if I have it, and then I'm going to see what happens. And it took me about 8 months to be able to identify every single time I did something that I need to finish this dinner, even though I'm full. Like I'm never going to have a dinner again. Like weird stuff, right? Weird signs. But nonetheless, things that are, important. And yeah, it took about 8 months. And then I was able to identify those and start to actively avoid or change those behaviors, which, anyone can take 8 months to change a mindset. It's not forever. So
thank you for actually giving us a timeline. And not that it's that going to be for everybody, but it is really helpful to go, okay, now I have a set space and time. Because otherwise, working on yourself is a forever thing, right? Until we die, especially for the people that really do appreciate growth as a human. Like I feel like that's one of the reasons why we're here. That being said, there unfortunately is no scientist that will help us individually, right? And so we kind of have
personal responsibility.
Darn it, again, every time.
Yep.
But to be able to have that, I have a personality trait where I am a researcher and I can't help it. So I have books upon books upon books of me writing down things about myself and my thoughts just so I can understand myself.
I have a great book for you if you're in the market.
Well, but right. But it's also in the busy culture that we live in to be able to take the time to sit down at dinner and realize, oh, I'm finishing this right now because of this and not thinking 20 steps ahead. How have you made that a priority in your life so that it only took 8 months? Because there's 100 things that we could be doing that with, which will be the rest of our lives. But how do you make it a priority so you actually are making a dent in it?
Wow. I don't know that I can answer that, Jamie, because it didn't used to be, That's a great question because it really is stumping me. I don't know what occurred in my head to make me realize now is the time to work on that. I don't know that it can be forced, but I will say the inflection point of me traveling down the self-improvement road at all was because I got into a forum of other entrepreneurs. Having that space and being forced to come and start to hear stories from others and start to share with others what was really going on, that kicked off the entire
So that was
curve.
A huge catalyst. Don't you feel like as a coach also, though? I always joke because I call people out. I'm like, you're doing it again, right? Because they love me and I'm allowed to say that. Because normally you don't have a relationship unless marriage or whatever. And even in marriage, you can't really do that. I know I was married for 11 years, right? Like you can't, there's nuances to everything, right? Yeah. And as a coach, you can sort of call that out, or a therapist, or however that you sort of have that radical honesty like you're talking about. But again, the reason why I asked the question before is because it's great when you're on with your coach or if they're paying attention to things, but there's only so much time and space to be working on each chunk at a time. So when you're on with a coach or you're on with a therapist, you're like, oh, I should totally do that. But then the integration of later, right? You've got that catalyst moment, but then you go back to normal patterns and habits and stuff like that again. Are you very partitioned about that? Do you go one step at a time? Okay.
I think about my life like Tetris, right? There are certain blocks that can only fit in certain places. And for instance, like listening to a podcast can happen when I'm walking my dog, right? So when I walk my dog, I listen to a podcast. There isn't like I don't feel like it today, or but it was raining. It's like, no, that's what I do. Like that, and that block fits into that slot, and that's it. I'm very strict about those sorts of things. I've learned about myself that I'm my brain's pretty useless after about 3 p.m. It switches into something called wine mode. I think that's the scientific term for it anyway. But regardless, I just do really good work in the morning. And by the way, I don't like early mornings either. If I have to wake up before 8 a.m., I'm kind of pissy about it. So, and I restructured my days and my life to take advantage of those things. And I think it's the folks who, again, talk about self-limiting beliefs. Well, but don't successful entrepreneurs have to work 12 hours a day, and don't successful, and it's like, nope, they don't have to do any of that crap. I know brilliant entrepreneurs so much smarter than I, 0 employees, 3 hours a day, multi-million-dollar company. That's like the holy grail, right? I built a company of like 30 people, and to your point, I'm like avoiding them. I'm like walking quickly to my office when I'm talking to them. I was like, what the hell's going on here? Like, people have offices in multiple states and go like, isn't this awesome? No, turns out that I like working from home. I like having these conversations. I don't want to go out and see anybody. I don't even want to put pants on. So, it was up to me then to recognize and then make those structural changes. Personal responsibility. No one's going to make them for us. Sorry, just one last thing. Unfortunately, we all have these things piled on us. Like, successful entrepreneurs have to do X. Is that true? And how do you know? And just like, stop that. Just stop.
It's a collective sigh of relief, and yet like it's easier said than done also, because Is
that true?
I love you already. No, but so this is what most people's perception would be, is that it's easier said than done because we have never done it before, or maybe we haven't done it to the level that you're asking for, which is sort of out of the comfort zone and uncertain, which is also like, do I even have enough time, energy, capacity, whatever it is for that chunk, right? And will it work, right? So the questions that I was having, as you were saying that, the perceptions of entrepreneurs based on what things that they think are correct, like you're saying, we have to have a business that has this many employees. Well, do you like managing employees? No. I don't, because then you build the thing. And I've worked with so many people that have tons of money that are completely unhappy. And the people that are listening right now that are finding inconsistency and incongruency in their business, please notice it and listen to what Peter is saying, because otherwise you're building something that you don't want later and you're going to burn it all down. And then what is the point of your life?
Yep.
All right, I'll get off my soapbox now. But go ahead.
People need to hear it. And like I keep, I've said to you, I think at least once, if not twice, like these messages would have fallen on deaf ears. I had to learn it the hard way. And I wish I knew, and I don't know, Jaime, I wish I knew what I could have said to myself that would have made me listen. And I really don't know the answer to that question. I was turned off to it. And I would have heard a podcast like this and been like, and I would have thought, well, that's nice of them to say. They've built 7-figure businesses, right?
Thank you for telling us the internal, because this is what people are doing right now. Exactly. Yeah. It's not true. It's not true.
And now I've known so many entrepreneurs who have 7-figure businesses. Like you just said, you work with people and they're unhappy, right? And listen, does money buy happiness? I actually think it does, if you use it the right way, But there are all kinds of other questions around it. How did you make the money? What does your life look like? What does your lifestyle look like? What do your decisions look like? What do your core values look like?
One of the things that I find I'm honestly very, very stubborn, as are my daughter specifically, right? So I can see it in her, and it's really fun to look at me and go, oh, you got that from me. Awesome, right? So that is very humbling in itself. But when I work with a lot of entrepreneurs who are also very stubborn, which there are definite assets to being stubborn. And the not so great thing about it is that we can bang our head against the wall and be like, pain? What pain? Sure, we're fine, right?
Yeah.
And so that, like you're saying, that moment of like, oh crap, I can't, push through this anymore, sometimes comes with banging your head too many times against the wall, right? Or I feel like what you're saying is honesty is one of the ways to get to that place where you can actually open and be vulnerable instead of shielding, right? Like looking at it with a curiosity instead of looking at it as a like, I am wrong because of this.
That's the word. It's exactly the word, curiosity.
How do we get people that are stubborn, that are listening right now, to become curious? I know we might not be able to, but what's your guess?
Well, the question is, what are you stubborn about? Because most people, listen, nobody walks around thinking, I am this way, or I'm stubborn and whatever, and gosh, what a crappy way to be. And wow, I'm so wrong, and the way everyone else behaves is right. Like, people take actions and have habits because they think it is the right thing to do, because they think it is helping them. So the question is that true? And how do you know? And I hope people were listening to my story earlier about scarcity mindset. Like one of the best coaching questions is, if the opposite of whatever you're thinking were true, how could you test that, right? So let's say like I'm stubborn, but it helps me, but it is a pro, but it is a what? Okay, well let's pretend that stubbornness was actually the number one thing that was hurting your life. If that were true, walk me through where that might be true. And no one I've ever asked a question like that has come up short. They've been like, well, I suppose it would be this and this and this and probably that, but I know it's not any of those things. It's like, well, there you go. So, it's one of those things where like, do you really know? And this is another thing. I've clients who are like, yeah, I'm really struggling. Is it that or it's that? And I just sort of listen and nod. And I love the silent treatment, right? I just like nod at them and go like, mm-hmm. And then they'll keep talking, right? And what happens is you get to see the wheel in their head. You get to do a full cycle with them, and then they start to repeat. And you're like, okay, cool, got it. And to another person listening, it's eminently clear what they've already decided. So then I'll just pause and say like, so do you really not know what you're going to do, or do you know, but you're trying to justify it? And usually it's the latter. So stubbornness or any trait is one of those things. Like, do you really know that it's a strength, or are you just trying to justify it? And what is that costing you?
Yeah, the Byron Katie stuff with who is that true and who would you be without that thought? Whenever I've asked clients that, they're like,
yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. What is it costing you? Is another one of my favorites.
Yeah.
What is it costing you?
Yeah, because it's easy not to look at it. It is our protective mechanism to not look at it on purpose and to not want to be called out on it, for sure. Or to, skirt around. I am the best at skirting around. I'm too good at asking questions to other people that I can, and that is not a good thing. Like my poor therapists and coaches hate me, I'm sure, because I'm squirrely. And that's because my ego is just trying to be so tight with what it wants. And then it goes in a loop. And that's why I'm asking so many questions about it, because I can be in that space of like knowing I want to be different and can feel the same gosh darn wheel turning, right? And going, I'm doing it again. Good times. But I do think this is how we grow as humans in general. So tell me, I know we have to wrap up in just a second because we're going a little over, but I liked your quiz. So tell me a little bit about the quiz. I'm apparently an honest challenger.
Okay.
I know
bad.
only a little, not bad. This wasn't good.
No, that's good. The second
I was
highest.
honest. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what the quiz is so everybody can go take it.
Yeah. So I designed it to get people into the content of like, what does honesty even mean and how do I measure up? And it's separate parts. One is, where do you get your information from? How do you form your worldview? Are you only watching CNN or only watching Fox or only on Facebook? Or, are you making sure you go behind the headlines that are being screamed at you to figure out, like, what does the data actually say? What are the political motives here? What is the other side of the story, or other 5 sides of the story as we have in 2020? And so it's getting at sort of how do you form a big picture? Then it comes down to how honest are you with and about the others around you? Are you a talker or do you listen? Do you think about core values? Do you understand the core values of those around you? Do you openly share with others how you're thinking and feeling, and encourage that feedback to come back to you, things of that nature. And then it deals with how honest are you with who you really are, what you really want, what you understand or not about what it's going to take to get there. And so it's just a fun way for you to get you thinking about, where do I rank on these? And it's 21 questions. It tells you what profile you fit into. There are 4 profiles.
Okay, what's the top one then? Because now I have a goal.
As honest innovator.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll work on it. I hope I'll be close.
That's the thing. It's not a personality test. It's not set in stone. It's a snapshot of what your behaviors are right now. And they are completely changeable. And there's a whole workbook that comes along with this to help you. And that's at honest2greatness.com.
Okay, I'm going to ask my last question. So what is one action listeners can take this week to help move them forward towards their goal of $1 million, besides buy the book?
Yeah. Honest to Greatness on sale on Amazon. I think one thing I want everyone to do is go have a conversation with someone much smarter than you. And don't go in with anything other than, hey, I just want to update you on where I am and share with you about the business and me, and see what you think about progress and what thoughts come to mind and what people come to mind, and see if you can start to kickstart any sort of feedback loop and networking leapfrog that could help you. Because what I find, Jamie, which is sad, and I've found it in myself, trust me, is we entrepreneurs get a great idea. We're like, oh, we're going to go build that idea. We sink a lot of time and money into it. Then we go to market and there's like nothing to validate it. right? And instead, we should be having a lot more conversations all the way along the road. And I think the number one reason why people don't do that is because they don't want to hear that their idea is bad. It's just not, listen, people, honesty, right? It all comes back to honesty.
Thank you so much for coming on the show today. Where can we get the quiz and find out more about you online?
Yep. So nobody can pronounce my last name or spell it, Kozloduy. So head to honest2greatness.com. That's honest2greatness.com. There you can find the free 21-question honesty quiz, which will tell you how honest you really are if you're brave enough to find out. Also gives you a free workbook. And of course, Honest to Greatness is on sale everywhere. And all my coaching programs are on that Honest to Greatness site. But only reach out. And I'll have a conversation with anyone, but only reach out if you're serious and not stubborn like this one. No,
all my listeners, core values, dude, core values. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Peter. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for being honest.
If you enjoy this show, I would really appreciate your wonderful words of feedback. Go leave me a review. I would love a rating, whatever you can do in the time that you've got. I would so appreciate it.